Hello, and welcome to the Atomic Lizards podcast. We're a trio of friends podcasting about the Godzilla franchise and other films we love. I'm Udi, the de facto film expert.
I'm Myranda, the film fanatic.
And I'm Dan, the kaiju extraordinaire.
And today we will be joined by guest host and friend of the pod, Mike.
Hi, I'm Mike. Happy to be back.
Hooray, hooray. In this month's episode of Our Favorites, we will be covering the 2019 coming-of-age book adaptation film Little Women.
Per IMDb, Little Women 2019 follows four sisters in the March family, Jo, Meg, Amy, and Beth, across several years as they mature from adolescence to adulthood while the United States struggles with the Civil War.
While also being in the directing chair, Greta Gerwig wrote the film, but the book the film was adapted from was written by Louisa May Alcott. According to Wikipedia, Little Women was made on an estimated budget of $40 million and reportedly earned around $218.9 million worldwide at the box office. Starring in the film were Saoirse Ronan, Emma Watson, Florence Pugh, Eliza Scanlon, Laura Dern, Timothée Chalamet, Meryl Streep, Chris Cooper, and Bob Odenkirk as Father March.
A few fun facts about Little Women from IMDb and other miscellaneous sources on the internet are: Number 1. After finding out that Greta Gerwig was working on this new adaptation, Saoirse Ronan reached out to her and told her that she would be playing Jo March. Gerwig, having just worked with Ronan on the acclaimed Lady Bird, was hesitant to cast Saoirse as Jo, but after realizing that her casting herself was a very Jo thing to do, she just emailed Saoirse back, "Yes, you're Jo."
Number 2. Amy's speech about marriage wasn't originally in the script, but it was a suggestion by Meryl Streep. She suggested it as a moment for modern audiences to truly understand how powerless women were in that time period. They couldn't vote or work, but through marriage, they could also lose ownership of their money, property, and also lose their children. According to Florence Pugh, she was given these lines minutes before shooting. They were handwritten on a piece of paper.
Fun fact number 3. Florence Pugh finished filming Midsommar only a few days prior to when she started shooting Little Women. She said that getting to play Amy after making such a stressful and anxiety-inducing movie was her version of therapy. I don't blame her.
You mean you wouldn't want to be in the 2019 acclaimed film Midsommar? Written and
No.
directed by
You're not
Ari
even
Aster.
asking me, but no.
I don't know about that.
I wouldn't. I wouldn't want to be in it either, actually, if I'm allowed to speak now.
Number 4. For their wardrobe, each sister was given a distinct color palette. Meg is lavender and green, Jo is red and indigo, Beth is pink and brown, and Amy is light blue. Marmee often wears a combination of all their colors.
Before jumping into our discussion today, we want to issue a spoiler warning. If you haven't yet watched the film and you don't want to hear major spoilers, please stop the podcast now and come back once you've watched the film. Otherwise, let's jump right in. So what are your overall thoughts on Little Women? Would you like to start us off, Myranda?
Sure. So, Little Women. I guess I'll just, in classic me fashion, pull up my Letterboxd review and just read that. I don't think it's from the first time I watched this movie. I think it's from like the second or third time I watched this movie. So I think I've only ever watched it like 4 times. Because, I mean, I do rewatch movies. I like rewatching movies. These time period movies aren't necessarily the ones I go to rewatch all the time. Although Pride and Prejudice with Keira Knightley is great, and I would also recommend Emma, with Anya Taylor-Joy in it. They're great, although different time period technically, not the Civil War time periods like the Regency or whatever. But yes, okay, I have my review. This is from last year. It says, "This film makes me cry every time for so many different reasons. It's just a very good film." And I still stand by that. It is a very good film. It's very detail-oriented. I like the way that the movie uses its structure, where it takes this story, where in the book it's like one continuous story. It's in chronological order. But in this adaptation, we have it in a way that like uses flashbacks or like jumping sequences, like beginning, past, or like adolescence, adulthood, and you switch back and forth. And the way that it's distinguished is through the color palettes. Like the childhood ones are usually way more bright, where the adult ones are a little more grayer and dim, mainly because of what's going on in the story, specifically around Beth. And the way that this movie is structured and the way that it was set up, utilizes this. I'm going to call it a scene match. It's kind of like a match cut. If there's an actual term of it, I don't know what it is. But I'm going to use scene match. A prime example of this is when Jo is sitting and taking care of Beth in like adolescence. You can see her sitting in the chair with Beth in the bed, and she wakes up, and then Beth is gone, so she panics. She runs downstairs, and then there's just this great like moment of happiness that Beth is okay. She's alive. She's feeling better. She's eating food. But then just to have that scene and then directly like match it with pretty much the exact same scene, but this time Beth is missing. The color grading is darker. Jo isn't running down the stairs in a panic. She's silent and like she knows what's going to happen. She basically could infer what happened. And then she goes down the steps and she sees Marmee and she moves and Beth's not there. And that like is such a heartbreaking scene. There's a lot of those moments in this film, but this movie utilizes that like match sequence or match scenes so well that like I don't think that the way they're telling the story could have been done any other way. I mean, I know they have told Little Women in different ways, but I think by doing this technique and playing around with the structure a bit brings a unique feel to it and a more modern feel to it. I haven't seen the other ones, so I don't really have anything to compare it to, but it's just a unique way to structure a film. And based on the other films that I've seen of Greta Gerwig, like Frances Ha and Barbie, and I did watch Lady Bird, but I don't remember it. But they have unique structures too, so that's translated into this movie as well. And then in the terms of the story, it's a story I think everyone can relate to, but it's very much about these four women and their struggles in their life and the like their wants and their desires and how that affects them and perceive themselves in some ways. And one like interpretation of Jo's character is that she's aromantic / possibly also asexual. For those who don't know, aromantic just means that it lacks attraction romantically towards people. And then for asexual, that also means just has a lack of attraction to people sexually. So you can read her character in that way. And several different moments, which I'm sure we'll get into more, but more specifically, like when she's talking to Marmee in the attic and she's just like, I'm very alone. I want to be loved. And Marmee asks, do you love Laurie? And she doesn't say yes. She can't even really lie about that because she just doesn't love him that way. She does love Laurie, but she's like not in love with him. So that is a way you can read this movie. I'm not sure if you guys picked up or are aware of that reading, but if you want to know a more in-depth analysis on that, I would check out the podcast Sounds Fake But Okay. They go way more in-depth about it. But I thought that was an interesting read on it. And there's a lot of other interesting reads on this movie too, and I think that's why it's so unique too, and why it's so popular, at least in like the circles I hang out in. A lot of people like this movie for a lot of different reasons, and it's just a really good story, and it has happy moments and sad moments, and it just brings you in, and it's a whole experience. And it's like one of the few movies that like really draws me in every single time I watch it. Even if I'm struggling to put it on, like I'll watch it and then I'm instantly engaged because it's just that entertaining and good and just a very unique story. So I guess that's my overall thoughts on it. There wasn't really anything that I disliked about it, but I never really watched it to find anything that I disliked. So yeah, those are my thoughts. So whomever is next may go now.
All right. I feel like I kind of need to justify my inclusion on the podcast here. I am a very big fan of Little Women in general, but specifically Greta Gerwig's version. I first watched it a couple years ago, and similar to Myranda, like I'm not a huge period piece person. I normally find them pretty boring and hard to connect to, but just the way that Greta directs this movie, the way it's shot and everything, the way it's cast specifically, like it draws you in so much. And I don't know, personally, like it just, they talk about it in like some of the behind the scenes featurettes, like how they wanted to make this for a modern audience. And I think it really does connect with some of the issues that like we see today, and like how timeless this story kind of is despite taking place 200 years ago. Yeah, I watched it for the first time a couple years ago, and since then I've watched it 5 more times. I really love this movie. Earlier this year I watched the 1994 Little Women for the first time too, and I've also read one chapter of the book. So that's how you know I'm a really big fan of the movie. I really can't think of any cons off the top of my head. I don't know, maybe little small nitpicks will pop up as we talk about it today, but right here I would just say it's a perfect movie and definitely one of my favorites.
True Little Woman head.
Truly.
True Little Woman Aniac.
Yeah, we can call it that.
Nice try, Udi.
All right, what about you, Dan? What did you think?
Yeah. So, Little Women. This was actually a movie that was on my watch list for the longest time, but I never really got around to watching it, and I'm glad finally that I did get around to watching it thanks to this podcast. So yeah, I thought this was a really good movie. The characters are great, the set design was good, the acting was really good, but the writing, I thought the writing was really, really good for this movie. Like, I feel like that's one of the strongest points this movie has going for it is the writing, because there's just lots of just good lines, and like just the way they explain certain things, like because I think Myranda had brought that scene up where Joe is talking about, she doesn't really want to marry anyone, but like she's lonely, and like just the way that was written, I was like, oh. Like that was, that's just true. Like, what do you do in a predicament like that, So I really liked how this movie was written, and yeah, I thought all the actors did great. The sisters, they all did wonderful, like portraying their characters. I like Timothée Chalamet; he was a lot of fun. So yeah, I thought this was a really good movie. I guess the only issues that I really had with it, and this was something that Greta Gerwig, because we reviewed Frances Ha earlier, and this was even something that Frances Ha did, where it would jump around a lot, and it wasn't really like clear when it jumped forward or backwards in time, because there's a lot of flashbacks in this movie. And I know at the beginning of the movie they like say, oh, this is Concord, Massachusetts, like 7 years ago, but then there are times where they just introduce other flashbacks, and it's like, so am I in a flashback right now, or am I in like the present, So I did get a little, like, it did kind of lose me a little bit there, but that's not really that big of a detriment to the movie, because all of the other positives that this movie has completely outweighs that small little aspect to it. I mean, that was really the only issue that I had with the movie. Other than that, I think that everything just that went into this was expertly crafted and very, very well done.
Hooray! Glad everyone is a Little Women Aniac. Coined here first in the Atomic Lizards podcast. Make sure
Good
to
try, Udi. Good try.
Forget it. Never mind.
It'll catch on one day.
There was an attempt.
Stop trying to make Little Women Aniacs happen. It's not going to happen.
Yeah, I will go back to the drawing board on that one. Maybe workshop it just a little bit.
Yeah, okay, I'll leave it at that. I'm glad everyone liked it so far, but of course I love it. Just to go back to the point that Dan made on the previous Our Favorites episode, where or another recent episode, I'm not sure honestly, but where he said that these are all movies that I really like, and it's like, well, yeah, they're my favorites.
The series name.
It's true. It's actually, I got to watch this for the first time earlier this year with Mike, one of his 5 viewings. But yeah, I mean, you guys, I mean, Miranda covered a lot of ground very, very well and very nicely. So, I mean, there's not too much more I could add. But yeah, I mean, the movie is everything you could want and more, honestly. I mean, Greta Gerwig, like, just from the start, I mean, I hadn't watched any. I still haven't watched any of the other Little Women adaptations that have come out, and I haven't read the book. But just knowing that she was attached, I was immediately interested. And then the casting started coming out, and I was like, "Oh my god, this cast is freaking perfect!" I mean, Saoirse Ronan, Emma Watson, Eliza Scanlon, Laura Dern, and Florence Pugh, and just like everyone immediately from the beginning was just like, oh my god, it's like perfect casting. I can't imagine a better overall cast like this. Honestly, it's probably one of my favorite casts in a movie yet, just because it's just so everyone's just top of their game and doing their best to encapsulate their characters, and I just feel like everyone so effortlessly is their character. I mean, from beginning to end, everyone just feels so natural in their roles, and it just feels right. I mean, just looking at the two parents, I mean, Marmee played by Laura Dern. Like, are you freaking kidding me? Laura Dern and Bob Odenkirk. Ah, that was like such a great surprise as Father March. I mean, he has like such a limited role, which, like, I mean, yeah, totally makes sense. But like, I couldn't picture a better person to play such a small role that is uniquely pivotal in a sense of like, so there's this sort of build up throughout the beginning of the movie, like, oh, we missed our father. Where is he? He's gone. He's fighting the war. And then like I couldn't like not to put this out into the world because we can't. There's a dark timeline where this happened, maybe, but like if it had been like Casey Affleck, that would not elicit the same response that Bob Odenkirk elicited when he appeared on screen. So it's like just perfect casting all around. And yeah, the cinematography is gorgeous. This is one of the best looking period piece films I've seen yet, I would say. Like, the color grading is immaculate, to the point of like what Dan was talking about, where there is a lot of jumping around, and it can definitely be confusing on like a first viewing. So often it'll jump between like the warmer tones of nostalgia and rose tinted glasses and just like living through memories, and then cut back to the cold harshness of reality. Like, it's so good, and the editing is tip top. Just everything about this movie. I mean, I am definitely down to watch any of the other adaptations or all of them, honestly. But it's going to be hard for any of them to pass this one up in my eyes, just because well, not only was it my first one and it's made for modern audiences, which entails us, but like, good grief, like everyone and everything about it is just perfect. So.
Well, I just want to make a quick comment real quick on the color grading. I am colorblind, so it's also possible that I didn't just pick up on that either.
That is totally valid as well, yeah.
I will say, when I just rewatched it yesterday, I did watch it with my mom, and it was her first time watching it, and she's not like a big movie person. She, very surface level film viewer, so she didn't really notice any of the color grading or anything. Like, she was getting a bit confused about the time jumping throughout the whole movie. And it was like about halfway through, like, I pointed out, like, well, the scenes in the past, they have like a more warmer feel, and like you can see like they have more warm colors, and the ones in the present are a little bit more dull, a little bit more colder. And then it was the scene where they're at the beach, like both of those scenes back to back, where she was able to notice, oh yeah, the scene in the past is a lot brighter, a lot more colorful, and then the scene where it's just Joe and Beth, it's a little sadder. It's a little more dim. It's a little more gloomy outside too. So she was able to notice that, and then for the rest of the movie, she caught on a little bit better. So it is just like, I think it's worth noting. It's one of those things, like if you're a nerd like me, and I'm assuming the rest of us who looks at color grading and stuff, you're gonna notice a little bit easier than the 2 movies a year crowd.
Yeah, that's totally valid. I feel like that's a good point to bring up as well, because I mean, yeah, for general audiences, it's probably not super easy to notice that sort of thing. Like they're just kind of watching what's going on. They're not really paying attention to the finer details, and that's not like anything against them. It's just, again, the traditional thing of, I guess I don't know if it's traditional, but like the way that we typically try to watch movies, at least sometimes, is like the proper viewing method is like watching it 3 times, because like the first time you're just kind of absorbing it. And I mean, most people in the general audience probably only watch a movie once, unless they really, really like it, or like it's just on TV or something. So it makes sense that most people probably wouldn't notice that sort of thing, unless you're like Mike said, unless you're a nerd like us.
You have to know the language in order to read the language, basically.
Very well put. Yeah.
If you know what to look for, you can see it.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. But yeah, so I know none of us have watched the other adaptations or read the book, but Mike, you said you watched one of the other adaptations and read 1 chapter of the book. So how would you say that?
I did do both of those things.
So, as the only qualified person to ask this to, how would you compare this to the other adaptation or the 1 chapter of the book that you read?
Well, I'll say about the 1 chapter that I read, very faithful adaptation of the 1 chapter.
What is the 1 chapter? Like, what scene in it, or what scene is it?
It's the very beginning. I'm pretty sure it's the Christmas morning scene where, and like it ends with them doing the play. Something interesting, from a literary standpoint, that the book does is have the narrator intervene, and like the narrator's telling the story, and then there's like a line where they say, and I'm sure the young girls reading this book are probably very interested to know what all of our characters look like. So here's a quick description about all of the March Sisters. And I thought that was very funny. And then I forgot to keep reading, but
Happens to the best of us.
Yeah, books are hard.
They're hard on the eyes, you know.
Exactly.
That's why you do audiobooks.
I know.
Those are hard on the ears.
I have a brain block where I feel like I'm cheating if I do an audiobook. I don't know what that's about. Trying to overcome it. But the 1994 film is the one that I saw, and that one I really enjoy that one too. Little Women 2019, gave 5 stars, but the 94 one I gave 4.5 stars. So like it's right there with it in my eyes. I think like the main notable difference between the two, well, there's 2, is that the 94 one is told in chronological order, and there's also 2 Amy marches. So all the other March Sisters stay the same when the time jump occurs, but they age up Amy to a different actress. So young Amy is played by Kirsten Dunst, and then older Amy is played by Samantha Mathis. So, and it leads to some like probably my main complaint with the movie, and that's that Laurie is played by Christian Bale in both timelines. So you go from having it'd be like an 18-year-old Christian Bale interacting with a 12-year-old Kirsten Dunst, and then in the next scene you have an 18-year-old Christian Bale interacting with a 18-year-old Samantha Mathis. So it's one of those things while watching it where I was like, well, that's kind of icky. I don't like that entirely. But it makes sense watching 2019 Little Women, how they keep Florence Pugh as Amy the whole movie. I think she plays a terrific 12-year-old. She, even though like you can tell that she's obviously not 12 in the movie, she acts her ass off, and you kind of forget it. Even in the scene where she's with other 12-year-olds, she still kind of blends in perfectly, and you don't really even question it. So that was like one of my issues with the older Little Women. Also, the guy that they got to play Frederick in the end is mega old. Like, there's like a 30-year age gap between Joe and Frederick in the 94 version, and was not a fan of that, especially since he's just like, he's not even like a hot old guy. He's just like a regular old guy. So
Yuck.
just kind of icky to watch. Also, Joe is played by Winona Ryder in that one, and she's excellent in the role. She is a great Joe March as well as Saoirse Ronan. So yeah, I highly recommend the 94 version. It's got just all the charm, and kind of like how talking about the 2019 one, they made it for a modern audience. Well, they also made the 94 one for a modern audience. So it's interesting to go back and see like what messages were important then and what messages are important now. Because I know like Greta Gerwig has talked about with her adaptation wanting to focus more on the adult side of things and how the nostalgia of their childhood impacts their adult lives. Where the 94 version, it's like 3/4 of the movie takes place in the past, and then the last quarter of the movie is that more present day stuff for them. So yeah, a lot of interesting things. I recommend Little Women 1994. Should all go watch it. I'll come back and talk about that one with you guys too.
I'm down. I did have a question though, and I could be misremembering. You probably just had a baseline interest in it to begin with, but was the motivation behind that watching of the 94 version because of a coworker or like a friend?
Yeah, that's so. My coworker, she is a huge fan of the 94 version and doesn't like the 2019 one as much. And her reason is that she doesn't like it going out of order, and she grew up with the 94 version. So like it is one of those things where like I feel like, yeah, if I had watched the 94 version first, I'd probably like that one more. But it's just kind of how it is. And I got really lucky. They were showing the 94 version at a theater nearby on 35 millimeter. So
Not to
pretty
brag.
cool.
That is pretty cool though. I'm jealous.
So yeah, since it had a high recommendation from my coworker and I really like the story, it's like, yeah, I gotta see this in a theater.
Valid. Yeah, I was curious to see her reasonings behind, because I remembered you saying that, so I was like, oh yeah, I can remember if you had told me back then what her reasonings were. But I mean, that makes sense, I guess. It's kind of like how a lot of people, like, they grew up with Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man, so that's their favorite Spider-Man. So
Exactly.
makes sense.
I cannot. You know what? We live in a world where we could do an Into the Little Women verse.
We could.
He's not wrong. There's so many adaptations of this book, so he's not wrong.
We could have an older, grizzled Winona Ryder, Joe March, bouncing off of a younger Saoirse Ronan, Joe March. There's also another adaptation that came out recently, I think like 2017 or something. I think there's like a limited series. I haven't seen it, but I'm pretty sure Catherine Newton plays Amy, which I can also buy that casting.
Well, now you have my attention.
Yeah. That might be another one. I'm pretty sure it's like I think it's a limited series. I don't think it's a movie. It's like a BBC thing or something.
That does sound really interesting. I was not aware that there was that other limited series adaptation, so perhaps I will look into it as well.
I just found out about it recently, so yeah.
If it did come out in 2017, then dang, because that was like 2 years prior to this one, the one we're talking about today. So
I know, and then got completely overshadowed. It was 2017.
Dang. Oof.
Oh, and it had, oh my, geez. This is quite the cast. Sorry, I'm looking at it now. Maya Hawke as Joe March.
Ooh.
Willa Fitzgerald as Meg March, who was
Wow.
just in Strange Darling. Catherine Newton as Amy. Sorry, go ahead.
I didn't mean to interrupt you. Willa Fitzgerald was also in the MTV Scream series, which is actually way better than you would think from hearing that title. But
All right. Oh my, it just keeps going. Dumbledore plays Mr. Lawrence. And Dylan Baker of Spider-Man fame, he plays Dr. Connors. He plays Mr. March. So this might be worth checking out.
we should add it to the list. But since you brought it up, I also wanted to ask you guys this actually, because I know that it was kind of a controversial decision. How did you guys feel about Florence Pugh remaining in the role of Amy throughout the film? Like, did it take you out of it, or how did you guys feel about it?
She looked way too old to be 12. I guess that explains how she kind of acted in some of those flashback scenes. That explains it. But yeah, she looked way too old to be 12. That's just how I feel personally, though.
What about you, Myranda? Did it bother you at all, or?
I wasn't aware of like how they were supposed to be. I just assumed, okay, younger sisters, older sisters. I think it's fine. I mean, they do it in movies all the time, or at least they used to do it in movies. I can't really think of any specific ones at the moment, but like they did change up how the sisters did, or the actors did change up the way they were acting, whether they were acting younger or older. And they did change up the hairstyle, and like it makes sense because like they didn't change like Timothy Chalamet, they didn't change Laurie or any of the other ones, so it would be really weird if they just changed like Amy, Florence Pugh to a different person. Like that would create some of the strangeness or uncomfortableness that Mike was talking about with the other movie. And since this is a different version of the story, I didn't see any like issues with it. I mean, it's kind of, if you really think about it, like, or like pay too close attention, it is kind of strange that like Florence Pugh is being, I guess in this case, 12 with a bunch of other schoolgirls that definitely look younger, but I kind of just assumed she was like the oldest in the class. So like it wasn't that strange to me. I think for this movie they did what was needed, and like if people have problems with it, then I guess people have problems with it because people have problems with everything. But it wasn't that odd or jarring for me. So
Was aware of the controversy, but I I was already a big Florence Pugh fan by the time like I was finding out about like the controversy, and I was like, why would you want less Florence Pugh in a movie? Please stop. But like after watching it, I'm like, I kind of understand. I mean, it is kind of a little ridiculous in some scenes where like like the school when it's like she does stand out, but I mean, kind of like Miranda said, I mean, you could totally play it off as just like she's the oldest of the girls, but I mean, like she does definitely just look much older than all the girls, so it is still kind of like for me, it didn't take away from it from the experience of the film at all, and like Mike said, I mean, she really is just acting the absolute hell out of like those segments to really sell the part of like her being 12 and younger and everything, but I don't know. Like for me at the end of the day, it doesn't ruin the movie for me. It doesn't pull me out of it. I'm just a fan of these actors, and I'm just glad that we got the opportunity to see them all working together and being in such a like phenomenal film. So it's really not a deal breaker or even a con for me at all. But I can totally understand if it bothers people. Like I'm not gonna go and say that it's like completely invalid. Like no, I mean I can totally understand it pulling you out of it, but did not bother me at all. You already kind of gave your thoughts on it, I think, Mike, but you can reiterate them because we're talking about it. So, did it bother you at all that Florence Pugh made double rolled appearance in this film, Mike? I guess not really double rolled. It's same role, but 2 ages.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't really bother me at all. Like I said, I think it's an interesting thing to have a, I don't know, what was she, like 23, 24 at the
Probably.
time, giving that 12-year-old performance. And I mean, like I said, like I can understand it being jarring on like, well, like in Dan's case, like he didn't know that she was supposed to be 12. And I feel like if you had read the book or seen any other adaptations, you know what age she's supposed to be. Maybe that can be weird. For me, I also didn't know the first time I saw it. I knew that she was the youngest sister, but I didn't know she was supposed to be 12. And watching, like hearing reactions online and all that kind of stuff, realizing what age she was supposed to be, and then like going back and rewatching it, that doesn't bother me at all. Like, she's a great actress, one of our best, and she gets to do an interesting role. And then I think it hits extra hard seeing like how mature and wise and well spoken she is. Like when we like see her give that speech about marriage being an economic preposition, um, and just like all her scenes in the future, like seeing her go from the small, immature, like little girl to being like a well-spoken woman, is it works really well for me personally. So I don't find it that jarring. I really like it. It's an interesting way to do it. And I mean, like, if you're adapting something, like, they already did 2 separate actresses. Let's try something new this time, you know?
Yeah. Totally
Next time
fair.
they adapt it, all of them should be 12 the entire movie.
But yeah, I mean, yeah, I'm totally here for them just trying new things within reason, but like trying new things.
Yeah.
If there's this many adaptations, like you might as well just experiment a bit, you know? So
Especially like when it pays off like this. Like
yeah.
personally, like I don't know, I was not big on the award scene in 2019. I know a lot of people were like mad that I think it was like Jojo Rabbit won over this movie for like adapted screenplay or something, but like other than that, I don't know much about what happened that season. But hey, Florence Pugh should have won as Best Supporting Actress. There, I said it. Is that a hot take? It shouldn't be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't have like an issue with them keeping her as like the 12-year-old and then as an adult woman. But like Mike said, I just found it jarring because, yeah, I didn't know she was supposed to be 12 in those scenes. And yeah, she does not look 12, but I didn't find it to be that big of an issue because it's like Myranda said, we see that in like movies and TV all the time. They always have like 30-year-olds playing 15-year-olds in high school. So like Tobey Maguire, he didn't look like a high schooler when the first Sam Raimi Spider-Man came out, you know? So yeah, I didn't have too big of an issue with that, but like Udi was saying, I can understand if people did. But yeah, it didn't bother me that much. I just, like I said, found it jarring.
Yeah, and I mean, just to quickly comment on this, just because I was vaguely, I don't really care about the Oscars, but like I was vaguely paying attention around that time because that was when Parasite came out, and I was hoping that would win big. I mean, I like Jojo Rabbit. I still like it. I still think it's really good, but there's no world where that's better than this. So it is kind of a shame that this lost to that, but. Oh, and at the end of the day, you know, it is what it is. Hopefully, the next chance that Greta Gerwig gets, she gets to win big at the Oscars. Going back to the film, just because this is since we've been kind of talking about different parts of the story and whatnot, and Miranda kind of touched on this at the very beginning when she was giving her thoughts on the film. Do you guys think that Joe March getting married in the end took away from her story at all? And if so, or maybe even if you don't disagree or whatnot, would you have liked a different ending for her, or are you happy with what we got here?
So the ending, Joe's ending, very interesting because the whole time, she's like, I don't want to get married. I don't. Well, she says to Lori, like, she doesn't love him in the way that he like wants or in that way. but that she wants to be loved. So on one side, I could see why the ending of her marrying the professor, or her like frenemy from from New York. I can see why they did that, but I don't think that's Joe's true ending in this movie. I think that's the ending Joe in the book has. Like, in this fictional movie, she's writing a book. The book is about the four of them. It's based on her life. So we see that. Basically, we're seeing the book, right? So at the ending, when it like changes and Joe is talking to the publisher, and he's like, yeah, but who does she marry? She needs to be married. And then I feel like that's when the movie kind of switches, because then you have like Joe talking directly to the camera. You have the publisher directly talking to the camera about the letters that they're writing. And then it becomes very dramatic and very, very like out of nowhere. So like Joe's ending is that she becomes a writer and that she writes a book, and at that point in time is not married, does not have that type of life. She's choosing to, make her own way without a husband and become a writer. And then the other part where she's like running to chase her frenemy, I guess, to the train station and like get ready and like all that, and then all of that jazz, and then the ending where she opens the school and like it's a big happy family thing. That's in like a color grading similar to like the nostalgia scenes, like the past scenes. So like that's why I think there's multiple ways to take this ending, and this is just the way I'm taking it. I'm not sure if you guys picked up on that or read it in any of that way, but I think that by doing the ending in that way, in the way that it was done, it provides the viewer with multiple interpretations, which I do like in a movie, when you can read a movie or watch a movie, read a movie, understand the language of a movie, and come to different conclusions and have different ways of viewing it, because someone else might view it differently and be like, yes, that makes sense for Joe's character. But like at the same time, it's like, if that is her ending, it comes out of nowhere. If Joe's ending is to get married, it comes out of nowhere. Because they don't really build up that relationship with her friend, right? Kind of just shows up at the end, and then bam, we're here. And I think that's like how a lot of like the books of the time like worked. Like the publisher is saying, it's like either the main character, she needs to be dead or she needs to be married. So instead of killing another sister off, she's like, okay, we're all just gonna be happy together at the end of my book. And the end of the movie, I really, 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 really enjoy the bookbinding process. As a graphic designer who loves layouts, it's just amazing to see. I watched a whole documentary on it a while back, and I was just fully invested, so much so that I went to like the Living History Museum I have close by me and was like, can you tell me things about the printing press when they were having one of their big events with all the like houses and stuff open, and the news shop was there, and I was like, can you tell me about it? So like just to see that in a film just satisfies my graphic design being inside of me, I guess. And just like the fact that she gets her book and they put the gold on it and everything, I just really, really like that scene. That is the ending of the movie, but that's not specifically like, I mean, it is okay. I was going to say it's specifically not a key thing for Jo, but it is a key thing for Jo because that's her whole goal, is to write a book and to publish a book. And she got to do it, and she did it, and she wrote it about her family and her loved ones, and very possibly for Beth, because she stopped writing, and then the last thing she wrote was for Beth. And then that sparked the whole idea. So I do like the ending, but I see it as two very different endings for two characters, the real life Jo and the fictional Jo. So did you guys pick up on that interpretation or anything of that nature?
Yeah, I'm also I agree with you, Myranda, because when I watched this yesterday and that happened, I didn't really perceive that as like Jo's ending, because yeah, that's her ending in the book. In fact, what it was is it kind of reminded me of the last year that I watched recently from Huri actually recommended it to me. It was called American Fiction. Now, if you guys have seen American Fiction, you know what I'm talking about. But it reminded me of that. So it's like, okay. So yeah, I didn't really pick up on that being like Jo's ending. I interpreted that as that's how she's ending her book. Now, so I kind of agree with Myranda. I perceive it as an ending for two different characters. You got the book Jo, like yeah, her ending is just to get married and live happily ever after. And then you got real life Jo, which her ending could very much well be different. But like I wouldn't say it took away from her story, because she had mentioned multiple times throughout the movie that, yeah, she doesn't want to get married. She doesn't think that that's all women should, like, that should be their only future is just to get married. No, she believes that women should be destined for more than that. But she does bring up during that one scene that she's lonely, and that's true. If you, like, unless you're somebody that enjoys being alone, then like that's fine. Like, I enjoy being alone sometimes, but eventually you don't surround yourself with enough people, you're gonna feel lonely, and you're gonna want to be around people that some friends or family or maybe even a loved one. So like, I can understand that, but it is kind of odd seeing as she was somebody that's like, I don't want to be married. I don't want to be married multiple times throughout the movie. And then she rejects Lori multiple times throughout the movie. But then just all of a sudden at the end, it's like, well, wait, I do want to be married. Like, I can understand that being being a little odd. But once again, like, loneliness sucks, So, so that's the way I perceived it. Very similar to the way Myranda did. What about you guys?
Yeah, I agree with both of you guys. I haven't done a lot of research on it, but so I could be talking about out of my ass here, but at least like in the 94 adaptation, like they don't have the scenes with the publisher or anything like that. And it was kind of my understanding that those scenes with Jo are more based on Louisa May Alcott, which would lend itself to the idea that like book Jo has a different ending than movie Jo, because like in the 84 version, or 94 version, my bad, like, yeah, she just kind of ends up with the guy at the end, and it feels a little weirder here than having in the 2019 version, where there's the kind of up to interpretation ending where we don't really know if she ends up with the guy or if it ends up being that's just the way that she ends her book. But I know like they take little things from real life and sprinkle it into the movie there. Like, I'm pretty sure like the actual Little Women, like the publisher wasn't going to do it, but then like the publisher's daughters read the few chapters that he had and demanded to read the rest of the book. And that's the only reason like the actual Little Women was published in real life. So I think they wanted to maybe still show the ending of the book in the way that it's shown in the book and in other adaptations, but they also wanted to add another layer to it, showing what Louisa May Alcott had to give up potentially to get her book published. Like the whole thing about the her keeping the copyright of the book, I know that's also true in real life. So the line about her selling her heroin into marriage to make the book possible, like that has truth to it, possibly. So while I think like maybe like for the time, yeah, that's just kind of how that's the only way books got made, and the fact that we got this book and then all these adaptations about the book at all is like a kind of a miracle. But yeah, even if it's true, like Dan said, Joe does have those moments of weakness throughout where, yeah, she says that she doesn't want to get married, but she also does feel lonely, and it feels more like a conflict of, I don't want to be a person who just gets married, gives up their autonomy, because now the only thing that's left for me in life is being a wife. I don't get to be anything else. It's that battle within where like there's the economic preposition of marriage, and then there's also like the I love this person preposition of marriage. And I think both of those things can exist, and that's what makes this movie and the story in general like a very realistic thing that, and it also makes it timeless still. Like we're still talking about it today, we're still debating about it, you know. So that's kind of how I interpret it. Like it is kind of showing the version that maybe Louisa May Alcott wanted or would have done if she was able to write this in a different time. And yeah, also like I think the book is like written from an omniscient perspective. I may be talking out of my ass, but I think there's like people talk about it being Mr. March, who is the narrator of the book, which you can also kind of see with, he's the one that says My Little Women in the movie. Bob Odenkirk, shout out, love that guy. He's awesome. Better Call Saul. Nobody. That's all I got. The guy from The Incredibles 2. But yeah, that's kind of my take on it.
All valid points from every single one of you. Yeah, I mean, I definitely, I feel like it's nice for the audience just because, like, if you just want to take the ending as like a, aw, isn't that sweet? Everyone got a typical happy ending with like a nice bow wrapped like up top the side of it. Like, you can just take it that way if you want. But if you want to take it in a way that is more consistent with like the characters, then you can take it how Miranda wrote it, and it's just like, well, no, it's just the ending of the book, and like it's a sweet, nice ending, but it makes more sense as like the ending to her book and not like her ending where she did what she said she was going to do, and like she got to publish her book, and you know she did it for Beth, and she got to you know, I guess I don't remember if this is part of her plan or if it was part of the book, but I guess maybe it's a bit of both. But like she got to like make this school in what used to be Aunt March's house, and all of that. So I definitely like, I appreciate that it does both things well in my opinion, but just overall as an ending, I just think it's very well done. It's very pretty and very sweet. But yeah, I like Miranda's, I like the way that Miranda like put the ending in how she described it, where it's more just the ending that she wrote for her book and not actually Joe's ending. Because I mean, like I don't, it doesn't, you know, again, both endings work for me, but I feel like that one just makes more sense and more consistent with her character than it just being like, oh well, you know, she's just happily married ever after. Like it could happen, and like Mike and Dan both brought up, like she just she didn't want to give up her autonomy. Like she wanted to still be able to be herself and to write and to just like live life, and she didn't want to just become a wife and just all of that entails and nothing else. She wanted to be more than just that. So, but at the end of the day, I mean, people are just human beings. Like we crave companionship, we crave love, and we crave, you know, being loved and cared about and cared by. So I think it's definitely possible that she did just end up marrying, but I think with her character, it makes more sense for her to have just ended up being, you know, just to have remained single and just lived out her life how she seemed fit and how she seemed best. So either way, I think the movie did a really great job of ending it in a way where people who want one way or the other can be satisfied, and yeah. That all being said, I wanted to ask you, Miranda, how do you feel about the representation of womanhood and sisterhood in the movie?
Yeah, I guess let's talk about some representation. As I sit here, I guess I'm the one that needs to talk about this, or gets to talk about it. Or I have this specific perspective on this topic, I guess. Yeah, so this movie is well made, and I think the representation that this film offers is also done really well. Because you get to see the sisters as their own individual people. They all have their own goals and aspirations. Joe wants to be a writer, Amy wants to be a painter, Beth is really into music, and the other one, Emma Watson, Meg. And Meg wants to have a family. So they're all their own specific and unique beings. Like, they all have their own motivations, desires, wants, and women are people. And, like, we have our own motivations, our own desires, our own wants. We just want to be who we are. We don't really want to be put in a box, I guess. I think most people can relate to that, but in the terms of this movie, like, these four characters are kind of being put in a box in terms of, like, okay, let's look at an example, right? So you have Joe, and she's talking to Meg on her wedding day, right? And Joe is like, let's run away, let's do something else. You don't have to do this. Why are you doing this? And Meg is like, I want to do this. This is my dream. This is my desire. And that, this is what she wants. And that fits, in this case, the more quote unquote traditional role of a woman can have, of being like a mother and a housemaker, or like taking care of the house and taking care of the children and stuff. So she wants to be that type of person. And if you want to do that, that's totally okay, because there's so many different ways you can be a person. And Joe kind of rejects that traditional type of box, I guess. And she wants to be on her own. She wants to be a writer. She wants to tell stories, which at the time wasn't necessarily easy or available to do that. So you just have very unique characters in this. And I think the fact that this story is so old and yet it's still relatable today, and that it's still talking about things that in society are being talked about, or like society has opened up a bit on that stuff, right? And you don't necessarily have to be that traditional woman. You could be a working woman in the 80s with your shoulder pads, or you can be an artist, or you could be a writer, or you could be anything that you want to be, right? And so I think this movie shows that very well and says that very well. Same with Barbie. I think that movie also talks about it, and since Greta Gerwig was in, like, that's her movie, it, like, by watching that movie and watching this movie, I'm seeing like recurring themes, and that's one thing I do like about her movies. Even though I wasn't particularly that into Frances Ha, and I don't particularly like Lady Bird, but she's just very good at writing her characters, and I think the source material is a lot of that also comes from the source material. And then I guess in terms of like the sister relationship or the sibling relationship, they very much feel like sisters and siblings. Like, the actors and the writing and how they're being portrayed is very accurate. I have siblings, and like, you mess with them, right? You say, no, you can't come with, and then they do something to retaliate, and then all of a sudden your book is burned. But the moment they're in trouble, you're like, I'm here to save you. I'm not going to let you, in Amy's case, drown in a pond in the winter. Like, there's just like those moments where it's like, yes, that is how these sisters react to each other, interact with each other. And that's just how like siblings like work. And like, it'd be really interesting to see more of like the dynamics between the sisters, because we see a lot of Jo because she is the main character, and we see a lot of Amy too. So like it would be cool to like expand on that, and maybe the book does. I'm not really sure. But in general though, they just feel like real people who are like, they just feel like real people who are siblings, who are related, who have spent like almost every waking hour with each other, and they have the plays, and they like play together, and they argue, and they just, it feels very real, which is really, really nice, because sometimes, most of the time, people write women characters and it's just stereotypical things, or like they're very flat characters. They're not three-dimensional beings. They're just,
Their role is woman, and that's it.
yeah, basically. Like look at Smurfs, right? All kinds of guy Smurfs and one woman Smurf, right? Or like, that's just a dynamic that shows up a lot. And like, as we move forward, it has changed. So that's always good. But I mean, I think most women would probably see themselves in this movie, and that's always a good thing, because representation really does matter. I did want to touch a bit on just Jo and like her relationship. Like I mentioned in my initial thoughts, like possibly reading her as aromantic. I just wanted to bring that up because this movie and like Pride and Prejudice and Emma and stuff are so focused on a character being like romantically involved and getting married and doing this very specific thing. Although they do stray from that, and like, that's not all those movies or stories are about. They're about other things too. But like in this case, Jo as a character mentioned several times that she doesn't want to get married. But I just wanted to bring up a few scenes that kind of work with this aromantic analysis. So when Jo and Laurie are on the hill and Laurie's trying to propose, and Jo is like, no, I can't love you that way. I don't feel that way towards you. Like, it would not work. We would end up hating each other. Like, in that moment, she does love Laurie, but she's not in love with him, right? There, at least for me, there's a difference between those two sentences. So I don't know. I feel like that is also an important representation to have for aromantic people or people on the ace spectrum when it comes to queer identities. And then another scene that could be evidence of this interpretation is Jo's speech to Marmee, when she's like, I'm alone, like I shouldn't have turned him down so fast. But she has this conflict, and when Marmee asks, do you love him, she doesn't say yes. She doesn't even try to lie and say yes. She just says that she's alone, and then she decides to write the letter because she thinks that if she doesn't do that, that she could like be left alone because her sister died, her other sister's married, like Amy's off in Paris, right? And that she just can't or doesn't feel that type of way towards people. And like this is a modern day like coding of it, but it is relatable in both like that like lack of romantic attraction way, as well as in like people are scared of being alone. And I think both interpretations can stand. It's just I don't think I'm explaining my thoughts as well as I could be. So again, I'm just going to direct you to the Sounds Fake But Okay podcast where they talk about it, because they just are more eloquent about what I'm trying to talk about. But in general, I think having like a romantic representation in media is important, just like it's important to have representation of the different type of women out there, or like sister bonds in media, or even like in outside of this movie, having like people of color in movies and having them properly represented, and having like Black Panther, like T'Challa was a major thing for the MCU, and like that's an amazing thing, and now kids have that. So like I think this movie, although maybe not for an average 7-year-old, I think young teenagers or young adults, or truthfully anyone, can watch this movie and see themselves, whether that's through the lens of them being a woman or an AFAB person, or having sisters, or being on the ACE spectrum or not being on it, and just in general seeing or relating to this very touching story about this family and their struggles and how they grow up together and how that affects their life in adulthood. So yeah, I kind of rambled a lot. I guess that's my general thoughts. Not really general. So yeah, does that like make sense to you guys? Like, do you see that reading or any different readings? Like, I'm curious.
I can totally see Joe being aromantic, or like just being asexual as well. I mean, I also think that it would be good for modern, like not only is it like a modern adaptation, but just for, like you said, just for like if there's like a teenager or a younger, like a kid or anyone who could see themselves in as awesome and incredibly well written and incredible character as Joe March, to see themselves like that would be awesome. It'd be like seeing yourself as a superhero. Like maybe it's not the exact same 1-to-1, but like just getting that representation would be incredible. So, and I mean, like the character does work, I would say, as like an aromantic individual. I mean, yeah, like again, like her comments are sort of vague enough that like you could say it's not, or you could say it is, like in either like leaning which direction if she is or isn't. But I mean, at the end of the day, I think it just works for like whoever, you know. If you feel that that is how she is, then it works out perfectly. And if you don't pick up on it at all, or you just don't feel that Joe is aromantic, then I guess that's your prerogative, and you can, however you interpret it is how you interpret it. But I think it works, and I mean a lot of the things that she says throughout the film, I mean, again, like back that up. So I mean, I think either way, it just kind of comes down to the individual. But I mean, yeah, I feel like there's nothing that disproves that she is aromantic, because like you said, even during like the most pivotal part where you might be like, oh well, no, she did actually love someone. It's like, no, I mean, she did, but she didn't. Like you said, like she does love Lori. She definitely does. But she's not in love with him. It's not romantic love. She just has a deep well of passion and care for him. And even when like they're on the hilltop and he's confessing his love for her, and asking her if she loves him and blah blah blah, like she even says the same thing, like she loves him dearly and that she thinks the world of him, but she just doesn't feel that way about him, and she knows that it hurts him, but she's being honest with him, and she's doing her best not to hurt him. But I mean, at the end of the day, she knows that she's just gonna hurt him because she just doesn't feel that way about him. And I mean, maybe that scene with Marmee where she's talking about how she's just so lonely, it's possible that I mean, yeah, she, even in that moment, she couldn't even lie and say like, oh yeah, I do love him. Like she knows that she doesn't really love him in that way, but maybe it's just one of those things, like maybe she's trying to convince herself that she could love him in that way just so that she's not as lonely. Plus, I mean, like, she wouldn't be unhappy with him. Like, they get along pretty well. But I mean, I definitely think that, I mean, if they had gotten married, that like it wouldn't work out because he'd probably want more from her than she could give, because I mean, yeah, she just doesn't love him in that way. So yeah, I think it is definitely an interesting. I mean, Joe March in general is just an interesting character, but like, there's just so much there in regards to like the ending, where it's like, is this just part of the book ending? Is it an actual like what happened to her, or like et cetera, et cetera? And then also like this part where she could be straight, she could be aromantic, she could be asexual. Like it could be a whole mix of other like things. It just kind of depends on individual to decide, I guess, really how they want to see her, I guess.
Yeah, it's so layered, and there's so many ways you can read Joe's character. There's so many ways you could just read this movie in general. Like, I don't understand how filmmakers can do this, because that's one of my favorite things about film, is that I can watch it and see it this way, or you could watch it and see it a different way. Or like, someone on the other side of the world could watch it and be like, yeah, no, I totally get that, or no, I don't see it that way, just because of the way like society works and the way our society values relationships, or marriage, or like the traditional gender roles, or any of that stuff. The way our society perceives that and how we've grown up influences how we read movies. And like, there's so many different ways you can read a movie, like The Matrix. And when I was in school, I read a paper where it's like, he's Jesus, it's Christianity. But then like later learning about the creators of that film, and it's like, oh no, that's a transgender like allegory there. Like, which the more you learn about things in society in your life, the way you're going to look at things differently. And in 15 years, when I look back at this movie, who knows, I might have a totally different reading. And that's just a beautiful thing that this movie offers the viewer. And that's why it can be rewatched, because every time you rewatch it, you just pick up on something different, or something new, or something interesting, and you see it in a different light. And like, I don't know how Greta Gerwig does it, but like, this movie and Barbie specifically are just, I just really relate to the characters in both of them on many different levels. And that's why in my Letterboxd review, I said that it makes me cry, because it does. Because it's like, I see myself in this moment. I see my relationship in this moment. I see this here. And it's just so nice to have. And like, the fact that these two movies exist now, and that people will get to watch them and experience that, is really, really cool. So like, representation does in fact matter. And the way you see the movie also matters. And it's just like this really cool, like, Mod Podge melting pot of people coming together, seeing themselves, reading it this way, reading it that way. And just like a whole really cool, like, moment to just bring a community together. And of course, like, we need more representation of womanhood, of POCs, people of color, and stuff. We need more of that in the media. But I think this one is really good that we have it, and now let's make stories about non-white people and having their stories be in-depth and interesting, and let's get that like representation in the media too, because it's needed.
Can I just say, anytime a conversation about a movie turns into just a passionate monologue about how much you love movies in general, that gets me so excited. I just wanted to say that, Myranda, that made me really happy.
It's just so cool. Movies are so cool. They're just,
Aren't they?
they're amazing pieces of art, and that it's just, It's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, what's what you were talking about, Miranda, like the whole representation thing. I mean, yeah, I think it's unfortunate that there are still some people who don't think that representation matters, but there's truly few things in regards to media that I feel truly can feel as special as feeling truly seen in a film, especially one like of this caliber, like getting a movie like Little Women or Barbie and getting to see yourself like that is I can't imagine. I mean, it's just yeah, like it I can't imagine that, and also just getting someone of the caliber of Greta Gerwig and the cast involved to make something that I mean will have so much meaning for generations is really really important. And I mean it's not the same, but we're getting there slowly but surely in a lot of different ways and different forms of media and everything like that. But I mean, two movies, at least for me, and not to get off topic, but just like two examples of movies like that for me that, I mean, I'm not going to go and pretend they're even remotely on the same level as this, but just really felt special in a way that I had never felt before was like Black Panther, Wakanda Forever. It's that one's kind of a double-edged sword because it's like I really love Namor and I think he's a really interesting character, and I really liked Tenoch Huerta's version of the character and that interpretation of the culture of the Talucanils and everything like that. And I just thought it was a really interesting way to adapt the Atlanteans, I guess, because that's technically what they were. That's technically what they are, but I guess again in the movie they're called Talucanils. But yeah, I just thought it was a really interesting way to turn ancient Mesoamerican people into like this comic group and to just kind of intertwine them with like the cons and everything like that, blah blah blah. But like, and then so that, and then especially Blue Beetle. Like Blue Beetle is definitely more so special in that way to me, just because that is truly the closest I feel that we've gotten to like a good Latin American and like more specifically like a Mexican American perspective, at least from like a bigger like blockbuster movie. I mean, even like Blue Beetle wasn't like a huge blockbuster in well, in terms of the box office return or its budget, but like in terms of its the feeling that I get from watching it. I mean, yeah, it's super impactful, and it's nice that they include things from lots of different Latin cultures and I mean, again, just like watching that, it truly felt like being seen in a way that I had never felt before. And, it's unfortunate that for some people, I mean, like they don't get as much from it because it's not really made for them in the sense of it means more to people who can relate to the culture, but it's just unfortunate it couldn't connect more with other audiences. But that's besides the point. But yeah, like it was just nice and special to be able to feel seen in a way that we had never felt before. And I think that the representation here for women and the representation for POC in other media is just super important. And I really, really hope that we can continue to tell more and more interesting stories with both, not just ones that involve pain and suffering. I hope that we can get to a point where more POC can just be in just regular stories, and women can have more interesting stories as well, like not always just being kind of like given the same roles over and over, or not just being given the role of like Dan said, like woman
Or love interest.
yeah, or love interest, or mother, or wife.
Yeah, it's so many other things. You don't have to just pick those four things
Yeah,
for any person that in that matter. Like people are just very unique people and beings and complex, and we just need to see more of that.
agreed. So yeah, I that's all I really wanted to like add to that, just because I mean, yeah, as someone who like grew up having like an innate sense of wanting to be seen on screen, but not really understanding it, just knowing that like I loved the characters in the movies that I loved, and like they meant the world to me, but it felt separate from fiction. It didn't like I couldn't connect fully because they weren't me. So to get to a point where we're finally getting media where I can like see stuff and be like, wow, this reminds me of this part of my childhood, or this part reminds me of part of my family. Like it is really truly special. So yeah. So I'll quit yapping now.
Kind of like to go off what you guys are saying. I think one of the special things about the story is like how timeless it is, because like the reason that they made a new Little Women in 2019 is because they wanted to tell a more modern take on the story. And the next adaptation, like, you can keep the core story the same, but it can be used to fit like they can modernize it even more. Like, it doesn't technically have to be set during the Civil War. You can pick any time in history. It could be the same story, but set with it could be set with anybody. It could be a black family. It could be a Mexican family, you know? Like, it doesn't have to be strictly this all-white family during the Civil War. You can do it in any time period. You can have a version in the future where Joe is more explicitly asexual, if that's a reading that is popular. Like, we can do these kinds of things with the movie, with the story in the future, because it is that timeless tale that lends itself to that kind of interpretation. Like, they're gonna make more Little Women. Like, that's just a fact. Like, if we're getting, it's in the public domain too. We don't have to wait for Sony to finally like be like, in 2049 we're gonna do another Little Women reboot. Like, no, like anyone could make this story, you know? I feel like I'm starting to repeat myself, but it's just like, it's a timeless story. It impacts a lot of people. Even if it's not yourself you're seeing on screen, you can still relate to it. I mean, at least if you have good media literacy. If you're not those people, like, you know, as someone who's a big fan of Star Wars, you see a lot of people who are like, well, I'm a man and that's a woman on screen, so I can't relate to that person at all. I there's no way I can put myself in their shoes at all. Like, you know, those people are stupid. But this is the kind of story that lends itself to being more open in its interpretations. You can modernize it. You can, you know, switch it up a bit.
In 2026, we get the Baz Luhrmann modern day retelling in, I don't know, XYZ
That would be
city.
badass. That would be badass.
He's
Little
gonna
Women
Romeo
with
and
guns.
Juliet it.
Can you imagine? Oh my God. Little Women, the script is exactly the same as the book, but it's in Las Vegas. After a nuclear war just happened.
Okay, that would be kind of interesting. Fallout Little Women.
Yeah.
They have done that with like Romeo plus Juliet. Look at the Leonardo DiCaprio version where they're like, let's take this and put it in this time period. So it is timeless and it can be interpreted or adapted in so many different ways. So it's very possible. I think Little Women in Space would be fun, but that's just me.
That'd be great. Maybe like Little Women in like the Roman Colosseum. I don't know. We could put these Little Women anywhere.
Sure.
No, man, Little Women with dinosaurs. Send them 65 million years to the past.
Little Women X Fast and Furious.
Oh, no.
Because it's all
Little
about
Women X
family.
Godzilla.
You know what brings all these little women together? Family.
Family. That was a reference to the last time I was on the podcast. It was Fast X. I thought.
Oh, yeah. What do you know?
Eagle-eyed viewers out there will get that reference.
I'm so sorry that was the last episode you were on.
Or was it the Super Mario Brothers movie?
I think that was before Fast X
Yeah.
came out.
Oh, was it? Okay. I don't
Yeah, 'cause
remember.
Fast X
So-
came out in the summer.
Okay. But
But
I
no,
really
little. Sorry, go ahead.
well, I just wanted to say really quickly because I had something to say that's kind of unrelated, but also a little related because you guys are talking about like how timeless adaptations could be set in like different time periods. So there was one time in high school where we watched a play of Julius Caesar by William Shakespeare, but they like modernized it. It was like guys in suits and they had guns and everything. It was really weird and bizarre. But yeah, it just made me think of that.
Hell
how you
yeah.
guys were talking about that.
That sounds
I love
kind
that
of
kind of
interesting.
stuff.
Yeah, it was like they actually performed it, and like it wasn't like a recorded thing or anything. They actually came and performed it in our gym. So
Oh, that's
wow.
awesome. We need
Yeah.
more
That's
stuff like
cool.
that. Like Prey coming out, being a Predator movie, like set in like a Native American like setting. Like that's awesome. We need more. Like if we're gonna keep like rebooting stuff to no end, let's have fun with it.
Yeah. Prey is a great movie. I watched it for the first time recently, and I was like, "Wow, this is amazing."
It's
I'm a
so
scrub.
good.
I still need to watch that movie. I know.
That's crazy, Dan. That's
I know.
insane. It's on
I know.
Hulu. You can watch it whenever.
I'm gonna wait.
You can also watch it in English, or you can watch it with the I forget which language they speak in the movie, but it's
right.
dubbed with that.
Oh,
I
that's
forgot
really
that they
Native
cool.
did that.
American
That is
language.
really cool.
That's really cool. But yeah, I'm
Yeah.
gonna wait for Alien Romulus to come out so I can rewatch the Alien franchise again, and then that'll put me in the mood for Predator, and then I'll watch all the Predator movies. So don't worry, it'll happen.
Hey, I haven't watched any of the Predator movies. I only watch Prey.
Oh, do you really? Have you ever seen the original?
No.
Oh wow.
It's okay.
Yeah, I've heard
Chopper.
Get in the chopper.
All right, enough about
That's a little
Schwarzenegger.
off topic.
We're not here to talk about Schwarzenegger. You know what? Maybe when I do our favorites, we can do Predator. So, but anyway,
Okay, sorry. Last thought, last little aside. Little Women, but with all like 70s and 80s action stars.
interesting. Okay.
Joe played
Yeah.
by Arnold Schwarzenegger. Amy played by Sylvester Stallone. Like, are you seeing the vision?
Okay, if we're gonna
I'm
go,
seeing a vision.
if we're gonna go this route, I want them to wear like the dresses and have wigs on and everything. If we're gonna go
Oh
that
yeah,
route,
definitely.
yeah. So, Arnold Schwarzenegger, I'm here to write a book.
I have to write the book. Get to the train station. I have to marry Frederick. I'm just so lonely.
Why?
We should
my
do Little
God.
Women X Alien X Predator. That would work out pretty well.
Okay,
Look,
if
okay,
we're gonna go that route,
it started out as a serious point, I promise.
yeah, okay, this
It's
is
all
just
bits. These are all
evolved.
bits. There's a real
this is
point
just-
to be made, but those are all bits.
This is just evolved into something else. But okay, Udi, if we're gonna go that route, out of the 4 sisters, who do you think would survive a xenomorph attack the longest?
I mean, probably Joe.
You think so, Joe?
I think so. Maybe
Not Beth.
No.
Yeah.
Too soon.
I'm sorry.
Can I just say, because I don't know if I'll get a chance to bring this up anywhere else, but it is a crime that Eliza Scanlon hasn't really been in that much else. Like, I haven't seen her in anything else but this. I checked her IMDb recently, and like, she doesn't have that many credits. I'm like, she's so good in this. How is she not in like anything else?
I was gonna say because I recognize
She's
like
in the hit
all of-
movie Old.
What?
Oh, I forgot
Really? She's
about
in
that.
Oh.
But it's like such a non-role.
Yeah.
But I was gonna say because I recognize like I forget the name of the woman who plays Joe, but I recognize like Emma Watson and Florence Pugh and Laura Dern and like literally everyone. But like
Mhm.
Beth was the only one I didn't recognize. I was like, who's that? Like I don't remember her from anything. So
I will say, I haven't watched this movie, but I'm going to recommend it anyway. I've had a few friends like begging me for the past year to watch Baby Teeth because it is apparently incredible and stars her. So add that to your watch list. And I will too.
It's already there.
Yeah.
I'll get to it in about 10 years.
That sounds right. I'm sorry, I'm getting off topic again. I don't mean to drag you guys down.
Nah, it's okay. We're all, it's all fun and games here.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Do we all want to cast ourselves as a March sister? Is that a fun little thing to do?
We can. I don't know.
We could.
No one wants to do it. I take it back.
Take a BuzzFeed quiz. Which March sister
Yeah.
are you?
We should do that. We can have that as like an Instagram reel.
Yeah.
We could.
Just screen record. Like, this is this person's result. This is that person's result.
And then when one of us gets the same result, it's like, well, we can't both be the same person. One of us is going to have to change.
We have to fight to the death.
Yeah.
Whoever loses gets scarlet fever.
Yeah, I don't
Ooh.
want scarlet fever. Sounds like a
Soon.
bad, not
I'm
fun.
sorry. Can I just
sickness.
say? Can I just say, but when I watched it yesterday, literally every time Beth was on screen, I cried. I don't know what it was. I was feeling very emotional about Beth's death. I need you to know I'm not heartless. It was. I'm just making I'm making jokes to cope.
Yeah, well, even I got a little teary eyed there, especially that one part where like her mother like lifts her up to change the linen, and she's just like hugging her mother. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
God.
Oh my god.
Very emotional.
Like I normally, my main crying point is the hilltop scene where Joe rejects Lori. Like that always gets to me. But whatever it was this time, something in the air, I guess. Everything with Beth, I was just like, oh man, I can't watch her die for the 6th time. This isn't fair.
Yeah.
And when she got the piano, and
Ugh.
when Chris Cooper was like, "You're like my daughter," and then she died just like his daughter. Oh my god.
That part got me, and then the hilltop as well, and then like the lonely speech in like the attic or whatever with her and Marmee. Ugh, God.
Big tearjerker of a movie. I love it so much. Hey, did I say that this movie's perfect? Have I mentioned that?
I don't know, but I mean, feel free to say it as many times as you want.
It's so perfect, guys.
Agreed.
It's so perfect. If you haven't watched it and you're listening for some reason, do it.
If you've gotten this far, why stop?
Yeah.
yeah. Did
What
you
are you
not hear the
doing?
spoiler warning at the beginning?
You do it.
They're
You gotta
here
watch
for the
movie.
bits, obviously.
Oh,
yeah,
Yes,
they're
you're right,
here to know
Myranda.
which Marsh sister would last the longest against the xenomorph. So
Part of the bit.
it's a great bit. We do bits here.
Bits on bits on bits.
Bits on bits on bits. Nothing but bits,
But,
baby.
But speaking about parts that make us cry, just like the whole second half of the film for me, just like the hilltop scene, as you guys mentioned, Beth's death, like her Joe putting the letter in the box, like just the whole thing, just the whole ending is just like very emotional, and it just tugs on like my emotions so much for various different reasons that it's like I just can't help it. It just happens. Like there's no stopping it.
I concur.
Big relate.
One other scene that I like got me yesterday though, and it's I don't know, it's just like a little thing, but and I guess it was kind of split up into different parts, but when Meg is talking to her husband, whose name is escaping my mind, but they're like talking, and then she like bought the fabric for the dress, and then they're like in the kitchen, and then he's just very, he's down on his luck and he's not feeling great, and then she's just like, I'm tired of being poor, like I just want to be able to enjoy some things, blah blah blah. And it's like it's a selfish little rant, but like, I mean, you can understand her frustration. Like, they didn't necessarily grow up with like a ton, but it can be frustrating to like want some things and to not be able to have them in it, and I mean, all these characters are such good people, and it's definitely like you can see that like they're really good people, and like to some degree like they probably deserve everything that they could possibly want, but it's just not how life works. And so you can feel her frustration of wanting these things, but then the immediate regret of saying that and then seeing his reaction to it, and then her just reaffirming her love and happiness with their life, and being like, no, like it was stupid of me to say that, like it just came out of me, but like I didn't truly mean that, like I really do love you, and just her affirmation for her love for him, and her just being content with their life and everything. I don't know, just that was I liked those parts as well. And I mean, obviously, like, it was sweet of him. I think it was like the day after or something, being like, "Oh, I'm gonna try to make it work, and I'm gonna do this and do that," and just seeing how good they are together. Like, she was like, "Well, sorry, I would love for you to be able to do that for me, but you can't make me my dress after all because I already sold the fabric, and we're gonna do this and that with the money." And just, I don't know. It's just nice to see like a good, healthy couple in a movie every once in a while.
I was just gonna say I agree with you. I I feel like Meg probably gets probably like the least amount of time of all the sisters, and but I think like what they do with her time is really important and effective. Um, just because like the whole story is like it's like different like paths I guess you can take in your life, and like affirming that Meg's path is just as valid as Joe's path or Amy's path. Like, I think that's really important too.
That's a really good way to put it, and definitely something that I didn't like think about abstractly, like looking at just the story overall, but definitely like a good point to bring up because yeah, that is a good point. It's just a nice way to put it. But speaking of multiple sisters, Dan, you grew up in a household with several sisters, and I was just curious to see if watching this reminded you of any interactions that they might have had with each other, or like that you experienced just like living in the house with them, or just the general environment of home, like growing up or anything.
Yeah, so I did grow up with three sisters. I was the only boy, and yeah. See, the thing is, like growing up, like because my sisters would hang out with each other a lot, but I didn't really hang out with my sisters too much because I just wanted to play video games all day when I was a kid. So like that's all I mainly did. But like a lot of the stuff that the March sisters did kind of remind me of like the things my three sisters would do. Like, I mean, it's not the same because it's different time periods and whatnot, but like my three sisters, like they would always like get together to like they would huddle like all together in like my oldest sister's room to watch this like show that they would love watching. And I remember like one time even like I don't remember how old I was, but I was just curious to see what they were doing. So like I opened the door and like all three of them in like unison like yelled at me like, "Get out of here, we're watching our show," or whatever. So I just like closed the door like immediately. So like the like seeing like the March sisters like spend time and seeing like how they would spend time with each other and whatnot throughout the movie, it did kind of remind me of like my sisters while I was growing up. So it did kind of have the same similar vibe, I feel, for sure.
Listening to you talk about your sisters, Dan, reminded me of how like me and my sister and my cousin and how we interacted, or like how I would spend time with like my Girl Scout group and how we like commingled and like did things together, or like watched movies together, or like played with our Bratz dolls and Barbies. And then specifically like for me and my sister and my cousin and my brother, like we would hang out during the summers and stuff. So I see both like that like sisterly bond, but I also just like I see it as a siblingly bond too because of the my two siblings. And it just reminded me of like summer time when we were like in middle school and just spending time together and like forming those like bonds, like I guess. I don't know. It just popped in my head, so I wanted to mention it, I guess.
I just want to say, yeah, for sure. Like I can definitely see how that can invoke memories.
I only grew up with one sibling, and it was my sister. But even so, I mean, we grew up pretty close to each other. I mean, being like our only like friends, kind of up at least until like you get to like teenage years, and then obviously the age disparity is too much to continue being as close, because like he's like, "Man, this person did this and this person did that." But I remember when I was a little kid, I would try to play with my sister when she was playing with her Barbies, and she sometimes would be okay with it, but other times she'd be like, "No, get away from here. Go play with your cars." And I'm like, "I don't want to play with my cars. I want to play with you and your Barbies." So, just it's always kind of funny to hear how like different siblings interact and whatnot. But
I just want to say real quick that I did get what's the word I'm looking for? Not like goaded or whatever. Like I did get goaded into playing Barbies with my youngest sister. So
Hell yeah.
yeah.
Did you have a Barbie dream house?
Not that I remember. She might have at one point, but
Did you ever get in the Polly Pockets?
I think so. One of them did. I think maybe. I don't remember exactly, but I definitely did play Barbie a couple times with my sister.
Hell yeah. I remember I had this Corvette that perfectly fit a Polly Pocket in like the seat. And so my sister would sometimes ask me to borrow like this specific toy Corvette that I had, and so I would let her. But then I would want to play it too, because I'm like, oh, I wonder what she's doing. Like that seems kind of cool. Like it's cool that, like to me, it's like, oh, she has like a cool action figure that fits in the car. That's awesome. I don't have a toy that fits like that, like snug as a glove. Like that's sick. I want to play. But then she'd be like, no, let me play like what I want to play. And then I'd be like, okay. And then I'd go to the other room or whatever. But yeah. So like I said, just fun to like hear other people's experience with their siblings and whatnot. But this is sort of a silly question, but just want to pose this to you guys to see your reactions. Imagine if someone you knew was in love with you your whole life and you rejected them every time that they tried to court you, and then eventually one day you realize that you actually were in love with them and plan to confess your feelings to them, and then you come to discover that they married your youngest sibling. How would you feel?
So, now once again, like this is like I've never been in a situation like this before, and I don't think I ever will be in a situation. No, I can confidently say I probably never will be in a situation like this. So, like, there's really no way to like know how I would actually react to this because once again, I'm never going to be in a situation like this. But just thinking out it from like my point of view in like the type of mental headspace that I'm in right now, I would have no one to blame but myself at that point because yeah, as stated in the question, this person would have tried to like court me multiple times and each time they tried I rejected them. Whose fault is that? It's not them. They were already showing their feelings to me. I was the one being like, no, I don't want to. So like eventually like it gets to the point where it's like, okay, well maybe I do like them. Well, it's too late. You know, there's nothing I can do at that point. It's not their fault. That would be my own fault. I'm the one rejecting them every single time. And yeah, it would suck. It would be a super crappy feeling, especially if it's like a friend or like a sibling that they ended up being with. But in the end, I got no one to blame but myself. So that's how I would perceive it. But once again, who's to say? Like maybe if you go back when I was younger, I wouldn't have that type of like I wouldn't be thinking like that. Maybe I would be thinking, oh, well, this person sucks and whatnot because, you know, I'd be younger and more hot headed. But, you know, now that I'm older and whatnot, like there would really be no one to blame in that situation other than me. So
Fair enough.
If I rejected them, and then I have a sister who's half my age, so that'd be a big issue. I think we'd have to kill them. I I wouldn't feel upset for myself. I'd be like, oh god, this person I thought was my friend, we gotta kill that person.
just like how your answer is, we gotta kill them.
We do, not
He turned
because
into
like,
John Wick.
exactly, like look, I'm just saying, like, I don't know when this timeline happens, but if this person this is a whole different movie. If someone like
Yeah.
that I was best friends with my whole life, and then they love me and I rejected them, and then they go after my sister who's half my age, they're in the ground. It is a John Wick movie. I'm sorry.
Yeah. I can see that.
That's just not right. If this podcast ever gets subpoenaed, I would never kill anybody. Dan, you gave the right answer. I just had to give a silly answer. I don't know. I guess it would suck. There. That's my answer.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Happy now.
It would suck.
But anywho, so just before we wrap up, Did anyone have any final thoughts they wanted to get out on Little Women 2019, or should we go into rankings?
Most relatable line in the movie. I can't believe that childhood is over. Amen to that, man.
Oof.
Amen to that.
That's so real. I want to give a
Yeah.
relatable line too. I like when Aunt March says, "What a disappointment he's turned out to be. Must be the Italian in him." That was my relatable line.
Yeah.
That one got me going.
Yeah. Yeah.
For me, a relatable quote, I guess it's more of a relatable moment, but when Joe's talking in the attic to Marmy, where like her little speech there about her being alone. Like, yeah, I get it. I think a lot of people feel that way right now in society, so just like that sequence. What about you, Udi?
I may not always be right, but I am never wrong. That's the most Virgo thing I could say.
That's a damn good quote right there. My mom thought that was the best thing ever put to film.
That's a good, yeah, I like that quote as well. Because even I was like, oh, that's amazing when I first heard that in the movie.
Aunt March is a baller.
What an Aunt March line.
I know.
That whole scene, oh my god, she's like coming for Meg. I felt so bad for her. Like, Meg is so strong. She's like laughing along with it and doesn't look hurt at all. But like, if my aunt called me a failure for marrying the person I loved, oh, it'd be over.
But you'd be in love with the person of your dreams.
I would be in love, but I can't stand the idea of anyone not agreeing with my the way I live my life.
I think if and when that were to happen, which God, I hope not, because screw them if they were to say that at your freaking wedding. But
Oh yes.
I don't think you would actually care.
I wouldn't care too much, but I do have an incessant need to be liked, Duty. You gotta understand.
That's true. I get it, but I don't know. I think you'd. I mean, knowing you, you'd probably just give a little laugh and then maybe hurt a little on the inside.
Think about it later.
Yeah. Think about it that night when you're laying in bed.
I'd dawdle over it. That's a word they use in this movie.
Dawdle.
Dawdle.
It's a good word.
Yeah, did you ever notice at certain points it seemed like they would use, like, I guess, quote unquote, slang from like the late 1800s? Like, there was that one point where she was like, oh, that's like, Joe was like, oh, that's so capital or whatever.
I loved that so much.
Was that just slang like from back then? Like, I don't know.
I'll take the movie's word for it, and I kind of want to start calling stuff capital. It's so funny.
I also like the part, I think when Joe is going to the dance with Meg, and then Meg is like telling her all these things to not do, and then she's like, one of the top things is don't say capital.
Yeah. I love when Amy is talking about school and she's like, I don't have any limes and I owe so many limes, and it's like, that's so real. Like, throughout history, kids are just trading shit in class. It could be limes, it could be silly bands, it could be jewel pods, because so many things.
I was gonna say real quick that part where that scene where Udi referenced where it's like, don't say capital, like at the dance or whatever. It's like, was capital the skibbity riz back in like the 1800s?
Oh, God, I hope so.
Yeah.
Wait, what is that a thing people say?
Yes.
Oh yeah,
That is a thing people say.
Strange. I am not up on the lingo then, I guess.
Gen X, Myranda, Gen X. That's all I'm gonna say.
Gen X.
Yeah, I think it's Gen X,
Is it
right?
Gen Alpha?
Gen Alpha,
Gen
or is it Gen
Alpha.
Alpha? Oh yeah, was Gen X the one? Okay,
Gen X is above millennials.
Yeah, Gen X is the one before millennials. Yeah, so it would be Gen Alpha. Yeah, Gen Alpha.
Okay.
But no, as someone with 3 teacher friends who teach middle schoolers, they're going through it right now. They have to talk just like them to get their attention, and they hate it.
It doesn't sound fun.
No. That to be like, guys, we're not being very demure right now.
But anywho, now that we're all wrapped up with the main discussion, how would you guys rank Little Women 2019? Myranda, would you like to start us off?
Oh, 5 out of 5. It's just a great film. It's well made. Clearly, I took a moment to gush about it. We've all said some really great things about this movie, so just makes sense to give it a 5.
Woo! That might be one of the first and only 5s I think you've given so far.
Very possible, but I would have to check.
Yeah, I don't really remember, but it feels right.
That's surprising coming from an Udi favorite too.
It is true.
I remember last year's Udi favorites were not very favorable to Miranda.
She did like blind spotting.
I mean, I've liked this movie before the podcast, so like it's not that I dislike the other movies, other than possibly Prisoner. It's just they're not really ones I normally watch. So
yeah, it's
fair. Out of the comfort zone. So there's that thing. Plus, you got to watch a movie for 3 times, and unfortunately, for a lot of the movies we cover on the podcast, I only get a chance to watch them once. So
yeah,
that's a factor too.
Yeah, and I mean, like there are some of my favorites that I mean, Miranda also loves, like Scott Pilgrim, Baby Driver, Arrival.
That one's really good.
Yeah.
So the ones that aren't fucked up, those ones.
Arrival is kind of a little bit.
Yeah, a little.
But anywho, what about you, Dan? What would you rank Little Women?
So once again, I thought Little Women was really well crafted, great acting, great cinematography, really good writing. And even though the jumping back, even though I did take a little bit of issues with the jumping back and forth, and like I did get a little confused there, I feel like the writing was so strong. It really is what makes this movie for me. So I'm gonna go with a 4 out of 5.
Very nice, very nice. And what about you, Mick?
I mean, I didn't have a negative thing to say this whole podcast, so I think pretty clear that I'm going to give it a 5 out of 5 too. It's just one of those movies that means a lot to me. And like I think it's expertly made. Everything that everyone said has been like so correct and like even like different interpretations. It's one of those movies that you can talk about, have your own opinion on, and no one's really wrong about it unless they are wrong about it. People that just don't like it in general, they're wrong about it. But yeah, it's a perfect movie to me. I love it very deeply. And yeah, I'm going to watch it again this year. I'm going to do it. It's going to happen.
I don't blame you. I will probably end up watching this at least one more time. I don't think my sister has watched this before, so I wanted to show it to her. So hopefully we can do that sometime soon. But yeah.
It's a great movie to show people. Like, I think out of like any movie, like this is one of the ones that you could like show anyone in your life and they'd probably get it.
Yeah, I agree. And like getting to watch this with you for the first time, it made it better. But yeah, so I will give my score, which I mean, again, this is one of my favorites and it is my pick. So, I mean, of course, I'm going to be biased, but I'm going to give it a 5 out of 5. I mean, again, like I said at the beginning, what else could you possibly want from this? Not even just like, I guess just this, but like from a movie. I mean, I think movies are art, but movies are also like they set out goals in a way of like they're telling a specific story in a specific way, and they can be more visually driven. They can be more in the writing areas, like focus more on that. They can be a lot of different things. They can be animated, they can be live action, et cetera, et cetera. But at the end of the day, they all have like specific stories that they're trying to tell. And I could not imagine the story being told in a better way than it is here. So, I mean, again, I'm totally open to watching all the other adaptations and or maybe one day reading the book, even though I don't read the books, but, you know, who's to say? But, yeah, I mean, I couldn't ask for anything better than this, so I'm going to give it a 5 out of 5, and so that means that the Atomic Lizard's official score is a 4.75, which equals a 5 out of 5. Woo!
Take that, Dan. You.
Yeah, I was gonna say I'm like the only one that didn't give it a 5 out of 5. I
We
must hate
took you
women.
over.
I must hate women, I guess. I don't know.
You're the one that gets scarlet fever.
That means he's the best of us, though. So
Yeah, well, okay, you don't get scarlet fever. You I don't know. You're the guy that Amy was supposed to marry but turned down.
Oh my god. No, I'm the you know who I am? I'm Joe's friend when he criticized her book and then she just starts yelling at him. That's who I am. And you guys are Joe.
Yeah, Dan, we are not friends and I do not like you. Please don't speak to me.
But Mike, I'm like one of the few Crash Bandicoot fans you know. Come on.
Oh, guy, you're right. I'm sorry, guys. Dan's actually pretty cool. He likes that orange rat like I do.
Although I do like Spyro a little more, but that's besides.
You're on thin ice, buddy.
thank you so much for joining us and listening to our conversation about Little Women. Stay tuned for upcoming episodes on more movies currently playing in theaters, favorite films of ours, and kaiju films galore. If you're interested in hearing more, check out our previous episodes, and as always, you can find us on Instagram at atomiclizardspod and on Letterboxd at atomic_lizards. Have a good night, everyone. Bye!
Bye, thanks for having me.